Michelle Obama is back in the headlines, but not for the reasons you might think. No dazzling speeches or book tours this time. Instead, it's her new podcast, in my opinion, causing a stir, and not in a good way. Remember when Jimmy Carter's funeral had everyone talking? Michelle was a no-show. Trump's indictment? Absent again. It's almost like she's avoiding the spotlight, except when it comes to this podcast. Which begs the question, what's going on? Is this podcast a calculated move or a misfire? One thing's for sure, it's got everyone buzzing. Buckle up, folks, because we're diving deep into the world of Michelle Obama's podcast drama. Let's be honest, the podcast hasn't exactly set the world on fire. The viewership numbers are, well, let's just say they're lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. Turns out, hearing about Barack's time management skills isn't everyone's cup of tea. And the critics, they're having a field day. Right-wing pundits are calling it boring, outdated, even desperate. And it's not just them. Social media is blowing up with comments like, "Nobody asked for this. Ouch." But here's the thing. Even bad publicity is still publicity. Michelle's name is back in the news cycle, whether she likes it or not. And that's gotta count for something, right? Michelle's podcast is just the tip of the iceberg. It seems like every Democrat and their mama has a podcast these days. It's become their go-to strategy, and frankly, it's getting a little out of hand. Take Gavin Newsome, for example. The California governor decided to spice up his podcast by inviting, wait for it, Steve Bannon. Yes, Steve Bannon. Talk about a recipe for disaster. Needless to say, it did not go well. The backlash was swift and brutal, even from his own party. It seems the Democrats haven't quite figured out this whole podcasting thing. Maybe they should stick to, actual governing? The big question is, can all these podcasts actually win elections, or are they just a way for politicians to hear themselves talk? It's a tough one. On the one hand, podcasts can be a great way to connect with voters on a personal level, but on the other hand, they can also backfire spectacularly, as we've seen with Michelle and Gavin. Ultimately, the success of a podcast comes down to one thing: content. If you're not saying anything interesting or engaging, people will tune out. And in today's hyper-competitive media landscape, that's a death sentence. So what's the verdict? Can podcasts win elections? Maybe, but only if politicians start using them to actually talk to voters about the issues they care about. Otherwise, it's just a whole lot of noise.